All right. So I am going to just hop in. Hopefully the audio and everything is working. It looks like it's fine on my end, but if there's for some reason a problem, you guys can just shoot me an email or let me know in the chat. There is a chat function that I won't be able to see while I'm presenting now, but I am going to leave some time for questions at the end, so I'll hop onto that chat. But if there's like an immediate thing you need to let me know about, just shoot me an email if that comes up. So today we are going to talk all about what you need to know to do your first triathlon. Hopefully everybody that's on the call here today is excited to learn about doing their first try. I want to start by just talking a little bit about kind of how I got involved in triathlon, because it's not a traditional story, and then go through some of like the myths of the sport, go through a race walkthrough, and then just talk about training and how to actually get going with doing your first race. So my intro to triathlon, I was not some super athletic person that just like naturally fell into this sport. I throughout college and high school did not like running at all. But I ended up, after I graduated college, I had gone through a breakup with my then boyfriend and decided out of spite, I was like, I'm going to do a triathlon and, I'll show him. And so I signed up for this race with a friend, and about halfway through training, she ended up dropping out. And I had to kind of decide, all right, do I really want to do this or do I just want to give up? And I decided to go through with it, and I'm really happy I did. One of the things that I like to tell people is like, I didn't have a training plan, I didn't have a coach, I didn't have anything when I decided to do this race. And while that's not necessarily like the perfect way of approaching a race, it worked, right? So the picture up in the corner there, that is actually my apartment pool where I lived in my apartment complex at the time. Looks a lot bigger in that picture than it actually was. It's like a pretty small circle, but that is where I swam. I rode my bike. I was actually too nervous to ride my bike on the streets because I didn't know that's like what people actually did. So I would go to Walmart really early in the morning. It was next to my apartment complex. I'd go to Walmart before there were a lot of cars there, and I would just ride in circles around the parking lot there. And I did not have a road bike or anything. I borrowed a mountain bike from a friend. It was a mountain bike with a warped back tire. So literally every tire rotation, it would actually hit the brake pad. I'm sure you can imagine how wonderful that is when you are on hills. Not the best thing in the world, but it worked for me. I was able to train. I went and did the race, and I crossed that finish line and just thought, wow, this is amazing. Like, what an accomplishment. And so that was, over 10 years ago now, and I've been doing them ever since. I just love it so much. So what is triathlon? I'm sure if you're on this webinar, you probably understand what triathlon is. It is a multi-sport event. Sometimes people don't know the order that the sports go in, so I do just like to emphasize it is a swim, bike, run event. So it starts with the swim, then transitions to the bike, then the run. The reason that a lot of races are like that is because if you think about liability and fatigue and everything, it makes sense to do the swim as the first event when people have the most energy levels. So it is governed in the US by USA Triathlon, or USAT for short. I am an ambassador and a coach under USA Triathlon. They do also govern some other types of races. So if for some reason you got through this webinar and thought, oh, I don't think tri is for me, they do also govern duathlon, which is run, bike, run, aqua bike, which is just the swim and bike portion of a race. So there are some different options out there. And there's over 4,000 sanctioned races in the US, so you have tons of options to choose from. I want to talk just about a couple of the myths that come up when people think about doing their first try. One of the myths is they think it's just only long distance racing. So people envision Kona in Hawaii, right? Like that super long Ironman distance, 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, marathon run. And those are amazing. I have complete envy over people that do full Ironman races, but they're not the only triathlon out there. There's actually 5 different triathlon distances, and by far the most common one that you'll come across is a sprint triathlon, especially for beginner athletes. A sprint triathlon is generally a quarter to a third mile swim, a 10 to 15 mile bike, and then a 3.1 mile run. So that's generally going to take somebody somewhere between, 1 to 2.5 hours, depending on the specifics of that race and their own fitness levels. So yes, it's long-ish, right? 1 to 2.5 hours of exercise is not short, but it's also not this all day long event that most people think of when they envision triathlon. Another myth is that you need tons of expensive gear, and this is the biggest one that I want to dispel. You don't need a ton of expensive gear. Triathlon can be an expensive sport if you love all the fancy stuff and you want to buy it, and that's fine. But if you're just getting started, you only need 5 things. You need a bike, and it can be any kind of bike. It doesn't have to be a fancy bike. You need a helmet. You need running shoes. You need either a swimsuit or a tri-suit. And so I'll just go over the difference there. So a tri-suit is either a 1-piece or 2-piece outfit that is designed specifically for triathlon. It's thin, it wicks moisture, it has some padding on the seat. So for like riding the bike, you get a little bit of padding there. They are a little bit pricey though. So some people don't like to buy them when they're starting out. Actually just got a tri-suit for the first time about a year ago. So for the first 9 years of racing, I just raced with my swimsuit. So if you want to buy a tri-suit, that's fine. You would swim, bike, and run in your tri-suit. If you don't want to buy one, that's okay too. You would swim in a swimsuit, and then when you get to the first transition, you can throw shorts and a shirt on over that if you want. So you need one of those 2 options, whichever you prefer. And then you would need goggles, right? So those are the only 5 pieces of gear that you absolutely need. You won't be able to do the race without them. I guess goggles might be questionable, but it would be really tough to do it without them. Another myth is that you have to be super fit and look like a triathlete. There's no one look for a triathlete. Triathlon is for everybody, whether you're thin, you're curvy, no matter what race you are, no matter what ethnicity you are, triathlon is for everyone. So just keep that in mind, that some people are intimidated. They think that, you have to look a certain way to be able to do the sport, and that is not the case at all. All right, so the myth of I can't swim. And I know if you're on this webinar and you really can't swim, you're thinking this is not a myth, and I totally get that. But the fact is that you can learn, right? So when my husband started racing, he did not feel comfortable swimming, and so he took lessons, and then he felt way more comfortable with it. So if you do not like swimming, you don't feel comfortable, hire somebody to do a couple of lessons. If you do feel somewhat comfortable, but you feel like maybe you could use some work on specific speed work or stroke or stuff like that, something like a club team or a master's swim class would be really great for you. And then I just like to emphasize, one of the biggest things that overwhelms people when they're doing their first triathlon is open water. So people feel comfortable in a pool, but when they get out into the open water, they get super nervous. And so keep in mind that when you are in a race, there are kayaks or some sort of safety people out among you in the water. Typically they're kayaks. Occasionally it's other, little boats or something, but most likely kayaks. And you actually can stop and hold on to a kayak and catch your breath. If you're starting to freak out or get out of breath in the water, you can stop and do that. And that is legal to do in a race. You can't pull yourself along. You can't make forward progress on a kayak, but you can stop and pause there and hold on to it if you start getting nervous in the water. So just keep that in mind. Swim angels are something I like to mention as well. They're a lot less common. So that's a voluntary thing that some races will do, where they'll offer a swim angel like a buddy to swim with you during that portion of the event. Again, it's not super common, but there are a couple of races here in Massachusetts that offer them. So if that's something you're looking for, just make sure you seek out a race that has it, and then you know that somebody's swimming with you the whole time. All right, so I want to walk through what a race is actually like, because I know that it can be overwhelming thinking about the race itself. I feel like if you're on this call, you're probably pretty comfortable, I would think, with like, okay, I know how to swim, I know how to bike, I know how to run, but it's thinking of doing them all together and thinking about race logistics that tends to scare people. So let's go through kind of each part of the race. When you get to your first triathlon, you're going to go check in and they're going to give you a couple of things. So they're going to give you race numbers. All right. So if you've ever done a road race before, you're probably familiar with this. You get a bib number to wear. So you're just like a road race. You're going to get one like that, that either goes on your shirt or that you can put on a race belt and put that on over your tri suit. You're also going to get a stick, like a little sticker with your number on it, and that goes on your helmet. So you'll get that. And then you're going to get a paper with adhesive on it that folds over, and that goes on your bike frame. So there's 3 places the race numbers go: your helmet, your bike frame, and then one that goes on you, whether it's pinned to a shirt or whether it's clipped on with a race belt. Hopefully that makes sense. You're also going to get a timing chip. So that's on like a Velcro strap that's going to go around your ankle. And that's going to track your timing when you run out of the swim and you get to your first transition, you do the bike. At each segment of the race, there's maps that'll catch that timing. So you'll be able to see your breakdown for each segment of the race as far as timing goes. And then of course your final time. Most races will also do what's called body marking. So body marking is where when you get to the race, before you go to the transition area, they're going to write your race number on your arm, your upper arms, and then they're going to write your age on your calf. Some races use like temporary tattoos for this. I honestly can't stand the tattoos. They're so hard to get off your skin. Most of them, though, will just use like a magic marker. And so they'll have somebody standing there and they'll write it on you. And that's a lot easier to get off after the race. But you can wear it like a badge of honor, right? So if it like the tattoos get stuck on you or something, you just wear them like a badge of honor after. So you've got your numbers, you've got your timing chip, you've got body marking. Then you're going to go in and you're going to set up your transition area. So this is a picture from a race a couple years ago. I was not fully done setting up my transition area, but I wanted to have at least like a real life picture to show you of kind of what this looks like. So your bike will be on a rack. That's my bike there. My wetsuit's hanging over the top of it just while I was getting ready. But your bike will be on a rack there. And then you want to set up all your gear in this little small area to the side of your bike. The biggest mistake I see people make if it's their first race is they have like this huge wide spread of stuff. And you can't really do that because so many bikes have to go on the rack. And if you're too spread out, it throws it off for everybody. So just make sure, generally think of like half the width of a towel, and you can see kind of that folded towel there underneath my stuff. That's a good amount of space to use. And try to set up your stuff in the order that you'll be using it. So you can see on the towel there, the black thing that's in the middle, those are like shorts that I'm going to throw on after I get out of the swim. And underneath that is my bike helmet. So I would put those shorts on, throw my helmet on, and then I'd put my sneakers on here. If you had cycling shoes, they would also be out for you to wear. So just think about putting things in the order that you're going to use them, making sure all your gear is out and ready to go. So that's kind of before the race actually starts. When you're going to start with the swim, right? So you've set up your transition area, you go down to the swim start. Now, wetsuits, that's something a lot of times people are confused about whether or not to wear a wetsuit. If you are doing a race and either A, you are not a comfortable swimmer in open water, or B, the water is very cold, those are 2 good reasons to wear a wetsuit. So wetsuits, they help with buoyancy. It's really hard to like sink in a wetsuit. They make you so floaty. I don't even think that's a word, but you float very easily in a wetsuit. And they also help to insulate you, and so it keeps you warm. If you're like up here in Massachusetts, if I'm doing a May or a June race, I'm gonna want my wetsuit. If I'm doing a race in August or September, I'm okay without one. So it just depends on what you prefer as far as the buoyancy and and also what the water temperature is. If it is cold water, whether or not you're wearing a wetsuit and your perception of cold, if the water feels cold to you, warm up before the race. Races will have a warm up period for the swim. You don't necessarily have to get in there and do some huge swim, back and forth and drills and everything. But if the water's cold, you want to get in there. You want to let the water, flow kind of through the wetsuit a little bit so you're used to the temperature, and you want to dunk your head in the water. You need to get your face used to that cold feeling, and you don't want that to be when you start the race in a panic with everybody else and you're already nervous about the people around you and swimming. You want your face to be used to that coldness beforehand. So that's just a little warning. Again, if the water is a regular temperature, it's not as big of a deal. But if it's cold water, make sure you do warm up first by going in the water and getting your body used to it. When the swim does start, there's a couple of different types of starts. So there is a mass start, which is where everybody in the race starts together. So usually that's done for smaller races. Like if there's, it's a 60-person race, they're going to start everybody at the same time. A wave start is where they divide people up based on typically age groups. Sometimes if it's a smaller race, it might be men and women divided into two groups. But for bigger races, they're usually going to divide it up into male and female groups and also by age group as well. So like the picture on the right here is from a race where I was with my age group for women. And this is an in-water start. So with mass and wave starts, they can either be starting on the beach where you start and you run into the water, or they can start in the water itself, like this one. This picture always cracks me up because everybody here is expending energy, like treading water, and I'm just like floating, like lying around waiting for this race to start. But yeah, excuse me, that's, they can start in water or on the beach. And then the last type of start would be a time trial start. And that is not super common. There's one race that I've done around here that always uses a time trial start, so I like to touch on it, but it's much more likely that you'll see the other two types. So a time trial start is where you line up 2 by 2 and you're going to start with one other person, and they're going to put about 3 to 5 seconds between each pair of people getting into the water. So it's basically just like 2 long lines of people, and you walk down, go, wait 5 seconds, go, and they just divide people up that way. So again, way less common that that's the case, but I do like to throw that in there. Once the race is about to start, so let's say you are in a mass start or a wave start, because that's most likely what you will be in. When it's about to start, if you are not a comfortable open water swimmer, or if you are getting nervous about all the people around you, some people get nervous, am I going to get kicked in the face? Am I going to get hit? There's a lot of people. If you're feeling nervous about it, start in the back of the pack on the corner furthest from the buoy. So if you're looking at your swim buoys ahead and it's up ahead on the right, start in the back on the left. Okay. And then when the gun goes off, count to 3. 1, 2, 3, and then start swimming. Give yourself a little bit of time to get in the water and get your stroke down. And by counting to 3 and letting everybody else who wants to thrash ahead do that, you're giving yourself the time to just compose yourself and get ready for that swim. And that 3 seconds it's not going to be a big deal. But it does help to just give yourself a little space if you are nervous about everybody around you. If you're a super confident swimmer, you don't mind the thrashing around with everybody, start in the middle, start in the front, wherever you want to start. The last thing is swim stroke. So you can do any type of stroke when you're out there swimming. Obviously, freestyle is the most efficient stroke when you're doing a triathlon, but if you start getting out of breath, you can flip onto your back and do the backstroke. If you are having trouble sighting for a bit, so sighting is like looking up at the buoys ahead to make sure you're swimming in a straight line, do the froggy stroke for a couple of strokes and let yourself sight and see where you're going. So you can always change strokes. You can tread water for a few minutes if you need to. Don't feel like you have to be this super pro athlete that has a perfect swim stroke the entire time and you're only doing one type of thing. You just do whatever you need to do to make it safely and confidently through the water. When you come out of the water, right, you finish the swim, woohoo, you come out of the water, and that's where you go through T1 or transition 1. So when you go up, you're going to run out of the swim, you're going to run to the transition area, and there's a couple things you'll do. So the first is if you do have a wetsuit on, you need to take it off. Then if you're wearing a tri-suit, you're all set as far as clothes go. If you're not wearing a tri-suit and you're just in a bathing suit, you may want to throw on, shorts and a t-shirt. You're going to put shoes on. So if you wear cycling shoes when you ride your bike, you would put your cycling shoes on. If you do not, then you would just put your regular sneakers on. You don't need to get cycling shoes for a triathlon if you're not used to wearing cycling shoes. I have been doing this for a long time. I still get nervous clipping in, and so I still wear sneakers most of the time. Personal preference. Cycling shoes are more efficient training-wise, but if you're not comfortable with them, sneakers work just fine. And then you're going to strap on your helmet. You need to make sure your helmet is strapped on before you touch your bike. Then take your bike off the rack and you're going to walk it out of transition or jog it. I put walk, but you can jog it out. But you're going to walk it out to where there's a mount line. The mount line is outside of the transition area, and that's where you'll actually get on your bike to ride it. You don't want to ride your bike in the transition area. So you walk it out, then you get on your bike, and that's where you start riding it. The bike portion of the race, just a reminder, any type of bike works. Yes, a road bike, a triathlon bike, those types of bikes are going to be faster for sure. As far as, I shouldn't say faster because it obviously depends on fitness level as well, but all other things considered, they will be faster on the road. But you can do a triathlon on a mountain bike or on a hybrid bike, whatever bike you have lying around. Don't feel like you need to go buy some fancy one before you do your first race. Like, don't let those things get in the way of you signing up. One thing to keep in mind is to practice using the gears. So if you haven't ridden a bike in a while, and this is kind of like your first forte back into it, getting ready for a tri, you want to make sure you're comfortable switching the gears so that when you're going up a hill, you know to put yourself into easier gears so that, you can spin more and not grind into the gears to try to get up the hill. Similarly, when you're going downhill, you can put some more resistance on there to get yourself some more traction as you're going downhill. So just practice that when you're out riding. As far as rules on the bike, the only rule you really need to know is about drafting. So drafting is where you are riding directly behind another cyclist. And the reason that this is not allowed in most races is because you have an advantage when you do that, right? So the person in front of you is absorbing all this wind resistance, and you get an advantage by riding behind them. So generally, most USA races are not going to allow drafting. You need to make sure that there's at least 3 bike lengths between you and the person in front of you. Now, if you're coming up, relatively quick on them, then you can pass them for sure. You would pass on the left. It's polite to give them a shout, hey, on your left, as you're coming up. You'd pass them, you'd get 3 bike lengths ahead of them. Okay, so that's really the most important stuff as far as rules that you need to keep in mind on the bike. When you're done with the bike, that's where T2, transition 2, comes into play. So you're going to dismount your bike outside the transition area. Again, just like there's a mount line, there's a mount and dismount line. So you dismount your bike there, you get off it, and then you walk or you jog it into the transition area. You're going to re-rack your bike. Then you're going to take your helmet off. And then if you did have cycling shoes on for the bike portion, this is where you would now change to your sneakers. Okay. So at this point now you're ready to go out for the run. And just, the run, if you're familiar with road racing, it's just like doing a road race, except now your legs are already tired, and most of the time you'll end up with what's called jelly legs at the beginning. So your legs just feel a little wobbly during that first quarter to half mile maybe. But I swear you get used to it, and then your stride gets back to normal as you get further into that run at the end of the race. So just keep that in mind if you do any kind of brick workouts during training where you're doing a bike run, or if the first time you really do that is during the race itself. It is a common sensation that your legs feel a little wobbly. So a couple training plan tips. In the email that I sent you guys with the Zoom link for tonight, there was also a training plan, a 12-week training plan attached to that email. I just want to go over a couple of tips related to that plan. Hopefully the plan itself is pretty self-explanatory. It's a 6-day-a-week plan, so 2 days of swimming, 2 days of biking, 2 days of running. Now, if you don't feel like you can fit all of that in, you can probably drop a workout for the one that you feel like is your strongest. So if you feel like your run strongest or your bike strongest, you might be able to drop that down a little bit. But I'd recommend trying to keep it as is. Consistency is more important than anything. If you swim twice a week, bike twice a week, and run twice a week, you'll be ready to do your first try in 12 weeks, no question. The plan itself does have some interval type workouts in there. Now, if you're not comfortable with those, you don't have to do them. So if there is a 45-minute bike workout that has hill climbs and you don't feel comfortable with that, just do a 45-minute moderate, comfortable pace bike ride. That's fine. Again, the consistency is the most important part. Now, if you do want to follow the plan as is, I just want to point out what some of the things on there mean. So for the swim workouts, those are going to have after the first 2 weeks, they're going to have a couple of different sections. So there's going to be a warm up, which is basically just comfortable swimming for the distance listed. Then there's going to be a number of drills. Now, drills are just like if you're swimming lengths of a pool, you're going to focus on a specific skill for that length. So you might do a drill where you're using a kickboard, right? So you're holding the kickboard, you're not using your arms, and you're just working on your kick for that length of the pool. Or you might do a pool length of the pool where you're focused really on good form and not worrying about speed. There's all different types of drills that you can do. In the link that was in that initial email, it has some of the examples of those types of drills, but you can also find those online. So it doesn't have to be anything crazy specific, but just remember to try to work on some of those things because it will help to strengthen your form. Then there's going to be a main set, which typically works on speed and endurance. So your main set might be something like 2 by 100 at moderate intensity with 5 to 10 seconds of rest in between. So you're going to swim 100, then you're going to take 10 seconds and rest, then you're going to swim 100 again. So that would be like the main set. And then the cool down's just easy swimming for the amount of time listed. So those are the swim workouts. The bike workouts, it would either be just a steady state moderate intensity ride, or some of the rides have what are called hill climbs. So with a hill climb, it might say like 4 by 1 minute hill climb. What that means is like during your bike ride, you want to do a 1 minute hill climb, which could be on a hill outside, or it could be if you're using a bike trainer, you just ramp the resistance up, or a spin bike, you can ramp the resistance up. And you do that for a minute, and then you take a little bit of a break with some easy pedaling, and then you do it again. If it says 4 by 1, you're going to do it 4 times total during your workout as a whole. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. There's also a few bike workouts that have what are called best effort intervals, and these are where you want to try to, go all out and put your best effort in for that amount of time. And then there's bike workouts that are called tempo workouts, and that's where you're trying to work at a pretty moderate to hard intensity for a sustained period of time. So it's not as tough as like a best effort where you're kind of going all out. If you're thinking of a scale of 1 to 10, it's going to be around like an 8. That's what you're going to try to maintain, for like 10 to 15 minutes. And that applies, there's tempo on the bike and there's tempo on the run as well. And it's the same theory. If you think about rating your effort on a scale of 1 to 10, you're really around, around an 8 on those tempo workouts. For the run, similarly, the tempo, but then there's also best effort intervals on the run. So that might be like a track workout where you're doing a 400-meter lap around the track and you're trying to do it as fast as you can, and then you're taking some rest time in between. The last type of workout that you'll find on the plan is called a brick workout. And a brick is where you have a back-to-back bike and run. And I highly recommend including these in the plan. Even if you decide to not use this plan and you find something else, bricks are really good for teaching your body how to run off of a bike. It's a tough skill at first to learn, again, because you have those jelly legs. And so if you can practice it a couple of times during training, it makes race day that much easier because you know what to expect and you've already trained your body to do that. So again, that plan, it's a 12-week plan. Every couple of weeks, it drops down a little bit for recovery, so there's a little bit less training volume. But if all of this seems overwhelming, if the intervals and the hills and things seem overwhelming, just get out there and swim twice a week, run twice a week, bike twice a week, and you'll be fine. Just put in the time. That's the most important part of it all. So if you decide you do want to jump into doing a try, a couple resources for you. USA Triathlon has what they call a time to try movement, which is just an industry-wide initiative to help motivate people to do their first race. You can look at mytimetotry.com, which has tons of different training tips and motivational tips, and there's free training plans, and they have things for different levels of athletes too. So this was obviously very beginner focused, but if you're watching this thinking, I could probably take it up a notch, tons of training plans for different levels. And then sign up for a race. So we all know that once we commit to something, we're more likely to complete it, right? So if you've been debating whether to do a triathlon and you're like, oh, I'm not so sure, I don't know if I want to do one, just go find a race, sign up for one, pick one that's, well, up here in Massachusetts, there's probably not one that's in a couple of months because it'll be winter time. But if you want to pick one that's maybe, excuse me, in June or July of next year and get ready for that, or maybe you want to choose one that's going to be a destination race and you go somewhere for a race in April or something. That could be a fun option as well for training. Sorry, my whole family has this cough and it's driving me crazy. So hopefully that was helpful for you. I'm going to stop my screen share here and hop on just the video part of this. But any questions? I know that I don't see anything in the chat box here, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. Feel free to type in that little chat box. It should be down at the bottom of your screen if you need to. Or you are always welcome to shoot me an email. I'm, always more than happy to answer things for you guys. If that is it, I am going to hop off here, but hopefully this was a helpful overview. If you have any questions as you're looking at the training plan, or for those of you, I know a lot of people were planning on watching the recording here, feel free to go ahead and shoot me an email with any questions that you have. But thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you guys soon.